Welcome to episode 84 of Contrarian Korner. I'm Ben Kellerin. Today we have a very special first-time guest on to talk with us about what's going to happen in the midterms, the generational divide, all the other important topics that are impacting the U.S. and the geopolitical stage, and we'll probably go down some rabbit holes at the same time. So, Mark, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, really great to be here. Contrarian, I love that. I'm a contrarian for sure, especially in my own industry, the polling industry.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to lead off with is that you're one of the few pollsters that has their finger on the pulse of the generational divide, and we'll get into that in a sec. But I also wanted to hear your kind of overall thoughts on the midterms, what you're seeing in some of the data, and where you kind of see the rest of this year playing out as far as politics.
Yeah, sure. And just as a quick intro, Rasmussen Reports is an independent pollster, which means that people aren't paying us to try to get one of their parties to win. We're in this for the people. And we're also one of the most politically outspoken pollsters. And people would say, oh, look at that. How can you do your job when you have a bias? And it's like, well, my track record shows that the most outspoken pollster is also the most accurate because we actually care about public opinion. But as for the midterms, to be a contrarian, if you had asked me a month ago, I would have said, you know what, Republicans could win this. And we just got a new generic ballot poll back this week, and now I don't think they can. So forget that. I mean, history tells us that this is just going to go to the Democrats because that's what happens. The party in power gets complacent, their voters don't turn out. And I think that's increasingly changing because I think Democrats are way more high propensity than Republicans are now. The Democrats have asymmetrical turnout advantage. They have a massive amount of money pouring in through Act Blue that the Republicans, in my opinion, can't really compete with. And even though their political leaders are horrifying and they don't really have a coherent answer, Trump can't get out of his own way. It's almost like he forgot why he ran, and the Republican Party looks completely incompetent. And I almost think that it would be fine, even if the Republicans suck, that they could still win if Donald Trump just had leadership and portrayed their path forward in the correct way. And I don't think he's doing it. I think he's doing Trump 1.0, which is shooting from the hip, throwing crap at the wall to see what sticks, posting meme slop that people are getting tired of, and forgetting why he's there, which is, yes, people wanted retribution. They want accountability. They want arrests. That's something that you're not just going to be able to keep yelling at your own administration for. Yeah, Pam Bondi, she better arrest somebody. Well, it's the buck stops on your desk, guy. And then the other one is just not really talking about the economy. And you talked about the generational divide. I think there's a strong divide here that's age-driven, where people over probably my age love the stock market, love the GDP, love assets, love corporations. And people under my age think the entire thing is a corporatist screw job that's stolen the future of America. And so if he wants to get all those youth vote that he just got a year ago, he's really got to acknowledge that. And it's almost like he's incapable of. And I think JD sort of talks about this stuff the right way, but Trump just can't do it. People did want all the illegals gone. We asked those questions. The numbers were very high. And they hate two-tier justice. They hate the idea of corporate CEOs being able to screw the system and hire all these illegals and not, have Americans get the jobs. And now Trump's out there today saying, well, we're not going to raid job sites. And why would we do that? That would make the economy unstable. And it's like, I think the younger people are kind of okay, because the system's about to collapse. I think we're okay with a couple of eggs getting broken to make the omelet. And unfortunately, the Republican Party is just not. It's not signed up for that. It's co-opted. It's never going to do the things America needs to do. You got Chuck Grassley out there. Basically, he's going to vote against election ID, voter ID stuff for elections. Why? This is a complete failure of the Republican Party as governing for what Americans really need, which is a new conservative movement that isn't just a bunch of beautiful losers. And so, yeah, I think we're going to lose big. I think increasingly looks bad. A Democrat +6 on the generic ballot, starting to get into moderate pickup territory, and Republicans started to pick a fight with gerrymandering. It looks like they're going to lose that too. So I don't know what to tell you. Everybody's probably going to get impeached and arrested.
Yeah, it's definitely funny to talk to older conservatives because, in my view, the Conservative Party hasn't conserved anything in my lifetime, and if you kind of see people talking about like Neil Howe talks about how support for democracy is declining among younger generations.
Yeah.
And it's pretty obvious if it's like the democratic system is just going to be a bunch of boomers voting over like how much money goes to EBT and Section 8 and Somalia and all these different things, right? It's just, I think it's obvious why support is falling. And I think there's, it's going to be hard to get that trust back and get turnout from the younger generations. And this is only going to become a bigger issue over the next 5 or 10 years because of kind of generational turnover.
Yeah, I 100% think you're right. And what is, I follow how I ascribe to the fourth turning stuff. And I love it because fourth turning tells us that there's going to be a major change in public opinion, new values, people changing their minds, new political alliances. I'm really excited for it. But the thing that kind of strikes me as interesting is that in that generational age divide, you see this focus in the olds on values, whereas, in my opinion, in the young people, you see more of a focus on like morals. And they're kind of two different things, like maybe I'm not using the right words, but when you talk to an older conservative, it's like, yay, Constitution, yay, Israel, yay, world police and neoconservatism. And we need to protect our democracy, like all these things, right? These isms and labels and stuff like that. When you talk to younger people, you're like, that you hear, well, the system sucks. We need to burn it down. Why should this system be allowed to arrest everybody? Like, why are we going to let this stuff happen? And I think that when you look at democracy, right, this whole thing, this republic we have is predicated on a legal agreement that our citizens, the Constitution. And when you have a subset of people who don't have the moral decency to abide by the rules they're in, I don't think that the system really is going to work. You know what I mean? Like, I think the writing is on the wall that, again, you can get back to it was made for a moral and religious people. We're not there yet. And I think there needs to be brutal accountability to get us there, but it can't happen within the confines of the Constitution. Listen, I love the Constitution, but I see this over and over again. I just spoke at a Colorado Republican event, and this guy who was like a 70-year-old guy before me spoke for 5 minutes about how great the Constitution was, and he was handing out pocket constitutions, and he said every political discussion you need to have has to start with how great it is, and it served us for 250 years. And these young people just need to like memorize this. And I got up and I was like, basically, nobody cares about the Constitution anymore. It's failed us.
It's been toilet paper for 30 years.
For 30 years. Exactly. And to pretend, it's almost more evil to pretend the whole system still works. And that's why, to a certain extent, you got to respect the Democrats and despise the Republicans, because they're still trying to essentially, I'm a pollster, right? I like the truth and I hate lies. And the side that's lying more right now is probably Republicans. And you just look at Pam Bondi and the arrests, right? I mean, in my opinion, I think that corporations and the government colluded to murder tens of thousands of Americans, including potentially my mom. And we're just going to let it slide because of corporate profits. Like, is that what's going to happen here? That's gross. That's evil. That's two-tier justice. And the Republicans are letting it happen. And our elected leaders aren't going to get arrested. And we're being told that it's tough to arrest somebody in DC. You got to cross your T's and dot your I's. Pam Bondi's working extra hard. And it's like, if it's correct that our elected leaders can't be tried and found guilty in Washington, D.C. courts, then I would prefer everybody get arrested and show everybody walking. Tell us the crimes, get the evidence out there, and let everybody see how illegitimate the system is. Burn the damn thing down. Don't, try some super, risky tactic that's not going to work, that's convoluted. You're going to try them in Florida, and they're still probably going to walk, and it's going to take 5 years. No, it's like, it's time to be accelerationist, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think people are basically ready for what I like to call fix-it politics. And it's not going to be about, okay, is this legal? Can we jump through all the hoops? It's going to be, okay, this guy deserves to either rot in a cell or be strung up. And I don't care, like, if a jury says it's fine, like whether it's the Pfizer CEO or some of these different people, like some of the politicians. I think there's more and more appetite for a Bukele type approach to U.S. politics. So I don't know if you
Yeah, I
have
want to be very clear too. I don't espouse all this stuff, but I'm measuring it in the polling, and these signals exist and are real, and people have to understand that this is coming because when we were hacking apart the federal government with Doge, voters under 40 were most happy. They're the ones that say they want arrests more. 6 out of 10 of them agreed with Donald Trump. If he who saves his country violates no laws. They wanted judges impeached more than anybody else. They like blowing up narco boats more than anybody else. They like raiding cities with the National Guard more than anybody else. Like the under 40 voter is wild. And what's weird is that they're not actually conservative at all. They're like really socialistic. So they say they want free market economies, but even Trump voters under 40 would support really socialist measures like excess wealth distribution because they think that that's needed to fix the system, which they say is unfair. 62% of them said the economy is unfair to youth. And what's even wilder is that the under 40 conservative is like, I don't know how to measure extreme hard rightness except in maybe like creativity. Like, I don't know, but we asked about AI, and the under 40 conservative by 55 to 40% margin is ready to give control of the legislature over to an advanced AI. So, yeah, it's going to be strange times when those people are running Congress and the Senate.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if we make that far. I'm kind of in the camp that they are just kind of figureheads for whoever works behind them. So it'll be
we're in a cold civil war right now for sure. Yeah.
I think it'll be interesting to see how this stuff in Minnesota plays out. But you mentioned a little bit about the gerrymandering stuff, and I wanted to get into that briefly because that's going to be maybe one of your areas of expertise. I know Indiana was basically saying, no, we're going to not going to do that. Like, we're going to play by the rules. And then within 2 days, I think Virginia is already redistricting, and they're also eliminating the mandatory minimum sentencing for everything from theft, rape, child porn, all the usual Democrat favorites. But what were your thoughts on the gerrymandering? Is that going to have an impact on midterms? How is that going to play out this year?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't like it. It's gross. The idea of elected leaders picking their voters and not vice versa is kind of anti to what I'm a really pro-democracy guy, which is wild that we're here talking about how great it would be if we were dictators. But I think it's gross. And the weird thing is that, the Democrats have obviously done this way more than the Republicans have. But when you get Trump into office and he's a boogeyman and all of a sudden Republicans start gerrymandering out of nowhere, it looked bad. And the polling was, wow, Republicans gerrymander. That's anti-democratic. And that's just the reality of public opinion. And, so I don't know what the final number is going to come out. And it's probably going to be a Dem pickup by a couple seats, which wipes out the Republican advantage there. But again, I think the bar is so low that Republicans, if they nailed this, really could have a massive win. I think that Trump literally needs to send the Republicans off and have them come back with a contract for America predicated on, we're not going to get to a golden age now. Sorry, I promised that. It's going to take years. But this is what the vision for the Republican Party, what America looks like if you give us governance, a real vision of what the economy looks like. And it's not just meme slop. It's not just, golden age and Trump is at a McDonald's drive-through window. It's no, corporatism has failed us. Wealth inequality is off the charts. Wages have been suppressed for 30 years by businesses. We're going to redress all of these wrongs. And this is our plan for restoring trust in the federal government. Not Kash Patel is going to call people government gangsters. No, we're going to frog march all the people that spied on moms that went to school board meetings like that. And that's all they need to do. They don't even need to do it. They just need to talk about doing it and lay out a plan and accomplish the steps 1, 2, and 3 out of 50. And if they could just do that in the next 10 months, I literally think they could win. I really think they do. Because I think the internet has broken the mainstream media's ability to. The Democrats have been driven off into echo chambers now, but they're very powerful echo chambers. They're very high propensity voters. That's the danger. Right now, the Democrats are like the Yankees and the Republicans are like the Mets, and the Mets suck. And there need to be 2 of them, right? And it's really hard to change people's opinions. But if your team sucks, if the owner's making bad decisions and getting the wrong people, you're just not going to go to the stadium. You're going to just throw your hat on the floor And that's what's happening right now is MAGA people are throwing their hat on the floor. They're not going to turn out for Republicans. And it's all just the optics. It really, I think, is the optics. How do we get on this? I went down a rabbit hole, but
no, it's we were talking about the redistricting and gerrymandering, how that might have an impact. But I think you're right that there's unless they do something, I think especially with a focus on like the home, like what's happening in the US, right? All the stuff in Venezuela, like great, fine. Greenland, okay. But I don't really think that's going to move the needle for the average American. Like they just aren't going to, that's not going to get them moved enough to go out and vote. And
no, at this point, it's instigating them. It's 10 years of Trump politically edging people. And at a certain point, you know what I mean? Like at a certain point, the way I look at it is if Trump just imagines he's running a 3-ring circus and he used his own voice, he was the announcer, like with the tails on the tuxedo. If he was just showing everybody what was in the main ring, and if the main ring was everything I just said, he could do whatever the hell he wanted in those other 2 rings and it wouldn't matter. He could fire judges. He could arrest CEOs. He could deport everybody. Nobody would care at all. But he can't stop talking about those other shows. He just has to do it. And now they're the main. Now we're 10 months away from the election, and independent voters think that Trump is literally going to invade like Canada. Like he can't get out of his own way. And it's just the tactic isn't going to work anymore because we're at wartime. This is, I think, very late stages in a cold civil war. I think there's resource nationalism going on. I think the whole world is preparing for war. And I think Donald Trump is not a wartime leader. He doesn't have the discipline and the vision in order to actually lead people in this situation. He's a deal maker. He's not a general. And we're really going to suffer now because, again, I think he was great. Like he had the perfect platform and agenda, but this is how the leadership is happening. And this is not good leadership.
Yeah, I think especially since they've been getting derailed off the immigration issue, right? If you want the young guys and people that are, I guess, further to the right than the traditional conservative, right? If you want them to show up, you're going to have to show them, right, movement on the immigration stuff, which I think feeds into the economy, and which is why I think that's a big problem is the affordability issue, right? If you look at the numbers and when you have Trump saying stuff like, oh, we're not going to go after the ones that have jobs, we're not going to do anything related to that. It's just well, okay, no change then. So it's just not big enough to get people excited,
Yeah, 100%. I just tweeted about this. And I think this is what's going on. I think Trump is surrounded by a lot of rich people, a lot of foreign dignitaries, a lot of billionaires, a lot of Fox News hosts, all people that are pro-establishment, all people that have significant stock portfolios, and they don't want economic change. And America needs economic change. And so business stability is standing in the way of the actions that Americans want the illegals gone. They've told us over and over again. We even ask, would you support 100% deportation or 100% amnesty candidate? And deportation wins roughly 55 to 35. So 100% deportation is more popular than Trump was last year. And over 60% support mass deportations. But here's the other thing. They also support tough business penalties. I think it was almost 70% for companies that employ illegal aliens. And everybody wants E-Verify. Why not? We already have the system. And these are things that the people surrounding Trump don't want. And this is what Trump doesn't get. And he great. He's hiring more ICE agents. Great. He's raiding corporations. But the optics of how they're doing it, the Americans are a decent and compassionate people. The optics are really starting to actually undermine his ability to deport enough people. And so I think they need to work smarter and not harder. But he's being told these things. And so he comes out and says, we're not going to raid businesses because he took money from people who work in industries that rely on this illegal labor. The home building industry have his housings, Bill Pulte. I'm sure they probably have subcontractors that are illegal for sure. So what they need to do is acknowledge that when you have corporations basically who can do whatever they want, that's a 2-tiered system of justice. It's the same reason people flipped out over the Epstein thing. And people in America, it's my opinion, don't hate illegal aliens. They hate the system that enabled the illegal aliens. And so Trump somehow thinks that he's going to be able to unravel this without attacking the system. And he can't. And that's the thing, is that you're an anti-establishment guy. You ran on retribution. You said drain the swamp. You said you're going to bring a golden age. The system is what has failed people. And he's trying to fix it without attacking the system. It's just not. It's so obviously not going to work.
Yeah, I think they do have to go back and revisit stuff like the Civil Rights Act and Hart-Celler, stuff like that. But that's clearly like way outside of their wheelhouse with the way they've been acting recently. So it'll be.
I don't know if you know this. Trump retruthed a post with Hart-Celler in it.
Where was that? I haven't seen it.
It was maybe like 2 months ago.
Okay.
Maybe I can find it in my Twitter profile. But that's the thing, is that he's feeding into all this stuff. He's still posting Q memes. We did Venezuela. Venezuela nabbing Maduro was actually pretty popular, but I think everybody still thinks it's mostly about drugs. But he's out there retweeting Patrick Byrne about the Venezuelan election integrity allegations. Actually, I think just in the last day, he mentioned that they've learned more stuff from Maduro about the 2020 stolen election. So, like, this is the problem, is like almost all the things that Trump signal boosts are things where people expect systematic reform. He's talked about the election theft for so many years, and now we've heard nothing. And so it's this rug pull, this idea that you can talk about military tribunals and then not have them. You can talk about arresting Pfizer people and Fauci and then not do it. You can talk about releasing the Epstein files and holding, Reid Hoffman and not do it. At a certain point, the rug pull is so big. Like, what was that Haktua girl? That's who Trump's going to be. He's going to be what's her name? He's going to be the Haktua girl of politics if he doesn't actually get his crap together.
Yeah, I definitely remember that being the news for a week, and then it turned into a crypto rug pull, which is, not shocking the way things have been going over the last 5 years. But I think it is interesting to see kind of the divide on how the economy is doing, and if you start telling people like what wages they would be earning today, like at their starter job, there's like, oh, well, back in my day, I could started my salary at $60,000 a year, and within like 3 years, like had a house and like started a family. It's like, okay, $60,000 a year in that time period is now like 150. So when you say the starting salary expectations for younger generations are absurd, it's like, no, they're just keeping up with inflation. And you measure it in gold and silver and stuff like that. It's pretty obvious. But what are your kind of thoughts on how the perception of the economy between the different generations fuels kind of the generational divide topic, and how that kind of plays out over the next 5-10 years?
I was just trying to Google long-term median home price to median income ratio, and I can't find it, but I'm sure it'd be very elucidating, because that's what I think. You need to peg incomes to assets, right? And right now we have wacky stuff going on with the precious metal market. The housing prices, according to income, is higher than it's ever been. Actually, I'm looking. What year did you say?
I think it was like 60,000 and I think it was 2000. It's either like late 90s or like early 2000s.
So median home price to median household income ratio was 4x in 2000. And this is blurry. So it's like 5.7x now. So that's significantly higher. But what's the current median home price right now is $405,000. So then that's saying that, where's my calculator? This is bad TV, but I really want to know the answer to this.
No, it's all right.
Let's use 420 divided by 5.7 is 74 divided by, we're talking about like 75,000 versus 105,000 median income just in 20 years.
Yeah.
And why is this? Systematic wage suppression by run-amok corporates who haven't been held accountable, who were showered with Bernanke bucks. There's been no creative destruction. They have offshored everything with reckless abandon, and then they are abused every visa program under the sun to import like 70% of freaking Bangalore. And those are the ones that make me mad, because I worked in tech. And I know, like, I worked at Walmart in e-commerce. I know how abused the H-1B program are. These people are not better. They don't code better. They hire their friends and buddies. There's kickback schemes. Then they bury it with the outsourcing and the body shops. And for every one of these people that you got rid of, that's like deporting 10 illegal aliens economically. And so that is what really would affect. And illegal aliens aren't buying the nice houses in the suburbs that Americans want. It's the H-1B that's making $300K to do bad code for a tech company that has decided that they just don't want white males anymore. And nobody's really talking about that at all. In fact, Trump was anti-H-1B in the summer of 2020, and now he's completely changed his tune on it. He sounds like Lindsey Graham on immigration, and it's because Lindsey Graham's his favorite golfing buddy. So as for the economy, though, it's like when I look at the economic signal, it's like, okay, reaction. Is the economy unfair to young people? Young people are going to say hi. Most old people own their homes. And so when you ask about the housing market, strict generational divide. But unemployment's much worse for the under 40 voter as well. I think the last time we measured it, we had 14 or 15%, and only like 2 or 3% of older voters are unemployed. So there's like mismatches there. But what's wild is, like, in the general polling, the biggest signals I see are these like lightning rods on like things like Israel and Epstein. That's where you see the biggest generational divide. And I think it's driven by news consumption and different sensitivity towards authenticity. And so I think the olds like anything that feels like it used to, and the young people are just trying to rebel.
Yeah, I think have you had a chance to read, I think it was like Compact article about the different impact on the generations for like the DEI push, and how it basically pulled up the ladder behind them? Have you read that article?
Yeah, it was a stunning article. JD Vance retweeted it, which I thought was wild too. And DEI is obviously catastrophic. And I have a different take than most about what I think DEI is. And it's not just hiring based on race and gender. We can get to that in a second. But my biggest takeaway from that article is it was about people in industry and script writing. And what was the third one? There was a third industry.
I think it was media, like journalism.
Yeah. None of those are H-1B industries. And that was my biggest takeaway, is that imagine if they had written this article and it was about somebody in tech, because the problems are 10 times worse in tech. And yeah, I mean, it's hugely a problem, but I think DEI is a symptom of a much deeper cause. And that's the feminization of our culture. And that sounds super misogynistic, but that was actually coined by a woman. And it means the feminine characteristics of personality, like agreeableness and cohesion, which is not characteristic of male-driven cultures. It just isn't. Like smart elite men do not care about agreeableness. And I started my career in the military, and the military is very successful at building zero defect cultures. I was on a nuclear submarine. Rickover had a culture that hasn't had any reactor accidents. And the cultural pillars are things like, well, the mission is more important than your ego. So if somebody's screwing up, you call them like a retard and fix it immediately. And those things are mean. And yeah, like obviously, if we're going to do important things, people's feelings are going to have to get hurt. And that is not the way my experience in modern corporate cultures are. And I think the existence of DEI is representative of corporate cultures that are not able to make tough decisions anymore. They make feel-good decisions that aren't rigorous, like Cracker Barrel redesigning their entire freaking portfolio. And I think that was an economic decision. I think they realized that they could capitalize a massive investment in real estate as opposed to actually fixing their margins on a daily basis, right? And I just saw that everywhere in Walmart as well. So the problems that we're facing here are much deeper than political. They're economic, but they're also cultural. And that I'm really worried that won't be able to compete on the world stage with the current level of leadership and decision making in our Fortune 500 companies. Because every Fortune 100 at the very least has leaned very heavily into H1B. And H1B, I think, is a logic trap. It sounds really good on paper, but if you think about it from, and actually objectively plan out how it's going to work, it's horrifying. It is not a smart thing. And I can tell you that just going all in on Indian engineering within Walmart e-commerce has probably cost them hundreds and hundreds of millions of future revenue from lost customers due to customer friction because of bad digital experiences, which were 80% of the problems affecting customers on Walmart e-commerce. Nobody's talking about this stuff at all. Everybody's like, oh, all these companies are so great. Microsoft's the best. Dude, I wake up and try and open my daily Trump approval snapshot on the Outlook app, and it can't even open an Excel file. You know what I mean? And so they use this term in Silicon Valley called enshittification. Well, I think we have cultural enshittification. And how do you fix that when everything is fake and gay and broken and corrupted, and there's no actual leadership? In fact, our society doesn't even crave the right kind of leaders. And I worked in military recruiting within Walmart as well. And I think one of the reasons that we had such a good corporate run in the 50s and 60s was because there were revolving doors between your former majors and colonels that were fighting World War II and places like Detroit, like corporate America, right? The Golden Watch kind of corporate America. White men doing most of this, obviously, but in military hiring, they just want to throw former enlisted people into a high volume funnel. That's all they want. They don't want the military leadership at all anymore. And so everything has just been arrayed to prevent us from being able to make hard decisions. And the fourth turning, the Band-Aid's going to get ripped off. It's going to get ripped off fast.
Yeah, I think what you're getting at there too a little bit is a return to something that has like a clear hierarchy, right? A clear structure as far as, right, government, corporations, businesses, right? What culture values and what culture shames. And I think there's some of the things that I've seen pop up over the last 5 years where, right, you see stuff about sports gambling and some of these other things. And it's just like, really, do we want to do some of the stuff where it incentivizes some of the worst behavior, not just from athletes, but also from, right, people that are stuck on DraftKings or on some of these different apps? It's like, look, there's a reason that we didn't allow this stuff broadly in the past, right? If someone has to go to a bookie and bet $10 on a game or whatever, fine. But to have it like available to the masses, I think is a huge mistake.
Yeah, look at how bad OnlyFans is. I'm being glib, but I'm surprised there aren't conservative influencers shilling for OnlyFans. They shill for everything else. They shill for India. They shill for Big Soda. They shill for the gambling companies. They shill for NFTs. Like, why not? Everything else. Yeah, I wonder there's like, I mean, again, I'm not a sociologist, but I look at this and I say, well, for so long, it's been, well, we'll do the things that look good. When what needs to happen is we'll do the things that are right. And those are two very different, distinctly different things. And it has to change. And I think it's a bottom up, like sort of vacuum filling kind of pull rather than push. And people talk about this a lot in religion too. I pull a lot on Christianity. Christianity is kind of like failing as a religion, although Christian ID is still very high, especially the mainline denominations are being categorically writing themselves out of existence. And everybody says, well, look at Charlie Kirk and we should have a revival. And isn't it great? And it's like, well, no, if there's not a revival, it's because it isn't being pulled. That means the message is incorrect and people don't want the message that's being given right now. And so I think there's going to be an aspect of the fourth turning where, well, you said it. I mean, we talked about this. Congress and Senate are about 60% boomer and only about 15% millennial and Gen Z. I think it takes about 15 years for those numbers to flip. And so Congress and the Senate are going to be completely wild when you have conservatives in there that don't care about the Constitution And I don't know how that looks, but I don't think we get there as well. I think it happens faster, and we don't know what the first domino to fall will be. The first one that I saw, like I read The Fourth Turning 2 or 3 years ago, and I've been looking for it. The first one was Israel. That was the first thing where it's like, if I looked in the polling 10 years ago, there is no age difference on the Israel-Palestine tracking question at all. 18 to 39 or 29s are the same as the 65 and older. Now they're so far apart, it's unbelievable. Only 19% of Gen Z supports Israel, and it's like 60% of the boomers. So I think we're going to increasingly see that on more and more stuff. And I think the boomers are going to cling to power tighter and tighter and tighter until there's like a rebellion that really hits different. And I don't know what that's. It could be NATO. I think NATO is probably going to be one of the bigger golden calves that get sacrificed here. And the numbers haven't really started to move much, but I think once we see that NATO is thirsting for total war, we'll probably change our tune, I hope.
Yeah, I think right or left, that definitely seems like the younger generations are more skeptical of what our military activities are. And I mean, we'll see what happens with like the geopolitical side of things with Venezuela, Greenland, Canada, right? There's maybe some talks of Alberta seceding there, but I think it is something where you look at all the different moving pieces. It's like trying to filter that through where, right, the U.S. kind of average, like the average attitude of a U.S. citizen is going to be in 5 or 10 years. I think is it's very interesting. So as far as geopolitics, like what is your kind of view on maybe some of the kind of recent events and where that maybe takes us, if that improves Trump's chances at all in the midterms?
Well, let me ask too. How old are you?
30.
If you don't mind me.
Right in between Zoomer and Millennial. I think it's technically like last year Millennials, but kind of on the bridge, I guess, in between the two generations.
What age does Gen Alpha start? Is that 2010 or?
I think the Zoomer generation is basically like 96 to 2010, 2011, somewhere in there.
I mean, the fourth turning is different every time, but what history tells us is that the millennials are the ones that are the hero generation who come out of nowhere to reorder society around their value system. And the Zoomers are kind of like the silent generation in World War II that everybody thinks sat by, but no, they were the people that got fed into the wood chipper. Basically, they were the ones that had to go die in the mud in Tarawa. So I hope that that's not your fate. You're almost old enough that you can't be drafted. And probably my kids will be. Actually, I hope the war starts sooner rather than later. I'm being glib, but from a polling perspective, it's not what you would think. So everybody loves Zelensky. Putin was the worst person we've ever polled on. They totally wanted to support Ukraine. The Democrats love this war. It was their most favorite war ever. It was the first time where we had more Democrats supporting war than Republicans. And yet there's still a really good chunk of Republican neoconservatism that loves interfering with global conflicts. They really do. Now, I think Venezuela is different because I think people acknowledge that this is probably the drug thing or something else. In fact, like 2/3 of the under 40 voters had actually heard about allegations that Venezuela was rigging our elections. So I think the election thing was a lot more of people are like, something's going on there. They don't care so much, right? Although symbolically, it's pretty incredible that we can just decide it's in our best interest and take a foreign leader when we're so desperate to defend Taiwan from China. So I don't know how that's going to play out. Tucker Carlson brought that to light. But over the years, the Ukraine thing, people acknowledged that we increasingly were giving too much support as opposed to not enough. It was never a massive majority. And people by a majority determined that it was a stalemate. But there's still a very strong majority desire that Ukraine gets back all its land, which is just loony bin. It's not going to happen. And I think Trump has been trying to get this peace process to happen. I think that getting in fights with Zelensky was good red meat, but I don't think that necessarily helped him. but he hasn't been preparing, I think, America, in my opinion, for it's like, yeah, there's going to be some major concessions for Putin if we want this thing to end. And that'll probably be unpalatable. The Middle East is a complete mess. People are less likely to want to defend Israel from places like Iran than they're willing to defend Ukraine and Taiwan, but it's still like 38% of them. And we have numbers, I think, that are out today that almost 40%, over 40%, I think 42% would support regime change in Iran. So that's not exactly popular, but it's not unpopular as well. So I think more it's like, well, we're doing all this foreign stuff. Why the hell aren't we getting our jobs back? Is I think really the main sentiment. But I think that's going to change really fast because just last week, I think it was, Trump mentioned bringing the Department of Defense annual budget from $1 trillion to $1.5 trillion. That's like alarm sirens, major concern, especially with the way the head of NATO, Mark Rutte's been talking about how we have to prepare for a two-front war with China and Russia. So when we start, I think America might shift when we start forward deploying troops to Poland. There's probably going to be a lot more attention on this kind of thing, and maybe people will forget about the domestic problems we have. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know how we can fight a major foreign war when we can't even subjugate organized terrorists, domestic terrorists in our own blue cities, but that's just me.
Yeah, I mean, I think the focus should be here at home, but I think you're also going to have some significant problems trying to get younger generations to even go along with a draft or sign up for like foreign adventures, right? Because they saw what happened over the last 20 years in the Middle East, and it's like they're on average the kind of 30 and under crowd has, I guess, a not great opinion of Israel and what their activities have been in the area. But right, if we're going to be involved in Eastern Europe, if we're going to be involved in the Middle East, if we're going to be involved in Asia, like I don't know if you're going to get a bunch of buy-in from the younger generations, especially to go fight for like this class of kind of this leading group, this elite, whatever you want to call it. So I don't know if you have any
I know how
thoughts
that
on
happens. I don't know specifically how that happens, but I know how the mind gets there. Is that right now only 27% of Americans think today's children will be better off than their parents. And the amount of hope, the amount of people that think they'll be better off 4 years from now than they are, like very little amount of hope, a lot of despair, a lot of apathy. And so if the global geopolitical situation presents a conflict in which there is hope for the future, then Gen Z will sign up for it. And I don't know what that looks like, but that's the scenario. Is that we have to think that by going through this, it will help restore some of the problems we have. And unless that happens, we don't fight and win a war. And so I think the leadership, the public opinion will all morph to a situation where if war is inevitable, that's what the war looks like. Otherwise, it's not going to happen, right? Because like look at after 9/11, right? Everybody supported that war. And they probably shouldn't have in retrospect, but everybody did. And it's because all of a sudden people realize, well, maybe George W. Bush being an idiot isn't that important because there's bigger things. And now we have hope that we will be able to fix these problems. And then it was like, well, like, what happened. But I think opinion will change like that. And quite frankly, I'm kind of cynical about this. I think the war is desperately needed by people to wipe the slate clean, to sort of inflate our way out of all this catastrophic debt, to rebuild our industrial and economic base. Isn't that weird though, that it takes conflict because we're unwilling to hold the true criminals accountable, which are basically corporatists, the corporate kleptocracy. That's the problem. Like we can't hold CEOs accountable. And so we're going to have to send young American men off to die. But it will fix the economy. We'll have a reinvigorated middle class. Like it will probably fix some of the wealth inequality problems.
Yeah, I guess the question is with the kind of different things that have happened in the past 20 years, right? I think you have like record low levels of trust for the politicians, for older generations by the young people. And so that's where I guess I wonder if they're going to buy in for something like this. And you think it's just opportunity, but if it's just like the same thing where it's like, okay, we've seen what happened in the Middle East. We've seen what happened with 9/11, and that story is a load of crap. We've seen what's happened in Vietnam, and I think people are more aware of the history and what's happened. So I don't know if that's
No, I think it'll play out organically, though. Like this isn't just going to happen overnight. And again, I'm not a student of these things, but let me ask you this question: if you had to pick a war to be drafted into, would you pick a war versus Russia, or would you pick a war versus China?
China.
Okay. So if we say, all right, we're going to like, hey, the first battalion moved, troops into Poland and blah, blah, blah. Everybody's going to freak out. There's going to be a feedback loop. Whatever politicians are doing it might get voted out. Trump might get made fun of at rallies. Like there will be a feedback loop and that won't advance. And then maybe, there's a different trial balloon and all of a sudden, like I'm just saying is that, or Russia blatantly attacks us over there, right? Or something like that. Like they use a tactical nuke on the NATO headquarters or something like that. And maybe then all of a sudden everybody aligns behind Trump. And we would see that in the polling. Like the polling is important here because all of this has to be predicated by some level of support. And they will find what is supported and exploit it, quite frankly. And maybe there'll be false flags. Maybe there will be real events.
I think you can bet on that, given our history.
Yeah.
No, I think it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I guess as you kind of look forward to the rest of this year and maybe the next 5 or 10 years, like what is kind of the top of your list? Like what are you focused on for like the different polls, the different things that you look at kind of day to day, but what kind of tells you like the long-term trend, where you think this stuff is going on a kind of longer term basis?
Yeah. So, I mean, we poll every day, and if I have an idea, we just ask it. So there are very few questions that I haven't asked, but then we'll ask them again and maybe opinions will change. And we have some good ones in the field today where we're going after, well, how willing are you to see businesses being held accountable for the illegal immigration stuff? So we're trying to follow everything that's immediately in the news tactically to give feedback, to help the administration do better, to help people understand what's going on. But we have 10 months to this election now. The writing on the wall is that Republicans are going to lose. I think they have a path to not losing. I'm going to be real loud and try and help tell them how they can not lose. But I think they're going to lose because they're losers. I think that's just what's going to happen. In which case, we'll probably have wild stuff happen, including Trump impeachments, and we'll pull on all of that. They'll probably come after free speech again. We'll probably see some like anti-Semitism push to take down Twitter or something like that. It's going to probably be dark again very quickly. And then we'll see when Trump loses the midterms, we'll see a reformation of MAGA into a better, more intentful, and hopefully less less Trumpy America First movement. I think JD's already kind of started doing that, the way he's talked about some of these things different and better than Trump has. And then we'll be doing probably a lot more polling on younger people and understanding this very strange world that we're going to be walking into.
Yeah. No, I think it is interesting because I don't think the Republican Party, at least the way it's currently structured, is going to be around in 5 or 10 years. I think there's going to be some major changes if we kind of keep this current system limping along politically. I think there's going to be some major changes there, but I don't think you're going to see the current set of values where we've kind of gotten to this point. I think you're actually going to see a so-called conservative party that actually plays to win instead of just being there to be liberals driving the speed limit, basically. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
No, I mean, it's like the Republican Party is changing. You look at Heritage Foundation, and the guy at the head of it actually said the word corporatism on the stage at AmFest. I talked to people from the Heritage Foundation. They're super based. I talked to people from John Birch Society. They get it. Like there are the conservative infrastructure is slowly becoming more America first. Some of these formerly villainous type outfits like the Americans for Prosperity are changing. People realize that there's been too much largesse. I had a really good conversation with a guy from the Club for Growth. He follows me on Twitter and likes a lot of the stuff that I say about economic populism. And this is a big corporate outfit, right? So these things are changing bit by bit. The problem is that we have a system designed to create inauthentic elected leaders, and that increasingly the younger voters are really, really good at spotting inauthenticity. And so a immovable object is going to mean an unstoppable force. It's going to happen really fast. And we are getting younger people into the Republican Party. And so there could be change, but I don't think it's going to be fast enough to avoid the pendulum swinging back. Because one of the uncomfortable problems is that the default position of America is kind of like democratic socialism right now. The left is becoming increasingly socialistic. Younger voters basically say, well, if the system's failed us, we might as well at least plunder the treasury. And they're right. They're probably right to think that, because it's better than just watching the boomers roll in all the money. And so there's going to be an aspect of like class warfare. I think that's increasingly going to be the 2028 race. I think you're going to see JD Vance talk a lot like Bernie Sanders, because Bernie Sanders is the only person in my polling that's ever beaten JD Vance in a head-to-head matchup. And then what's going to happen is people like Jamie Dimon are going to poke fun at him and say he sounds like Bernie Sanders and probably withdraw their funding. And maybe JD should win that. Like, he polls very well. But I don't know if the Republican Party is going to want to buy what he's selling. And of course, there's no hope of a third party stepping in here in any meaningful way that does anything other than just undermine the Republican vote. So the Republican Party probably is medium term just going to implode into complete loserdom. And then it's just a question of like, okay, well, how insane are the Democrats going to be? Because they're going to do things like a $10 trillion housing bill. Of course, it's going to be the first thing they do. It's going to be bipartisan. It's going to get 30 Republican votes. And what are people on the right going to do? So they'll either poke the bear and try and censor everybody and drive them off into digital ghettos again, or they'll learn from the Biden administration and say, no, we could just act normal and not be color revolutionaries and maybe stay in power. But it's like the right's in power, then the problem becomes civil war. The left's in power, the problem becomes revolution. And right now, it looks like the left's going to be back in power. So I just don't know how revolutionary the right's going to get. Probably not that revolutionary.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting conundrum to think about as far as where this all goes in the next handful of years. But as far as looking out a little bit further to 2028, you think that Vance is basically going to be the guy and has a very good shot against, say, a Gavin Newsom or whoever else might run on the other side?
I've never seen Gavin Newsom in my numbers get higher than a 37. And right now, the Democrat primary frontrunner is Kamala Harris, which is hilarious because she's done nothing to improve since the last run. And JD Vance's primary polling numbers are better than Trump's were at this point in 2022. So he looks almost inevitable. I mean, obviously, there are black swans. He could shoot himself in the foot. Like, he could pull a Vivek Ramaswamy and delete his entire political career with one tweet. That obviously could happen, but I think he's shrewd enough not to let that happen. So he looks pretty inevitable as the Republican candidate. And with polling numbers this strong, to be honest with you, I almost wonder if he steps into office with less strings attached than Trump did. I really hope that that's the case. But I don't know if he's going to be able to get the Republican mandate that he needs then. Maybe the 2 years of a Democrat Congress will be insane enough for America, or maybe it won't. But you have to wonder. I mean, they're not helping him. They're obviously going to undermine him at every step of the way. You think they're going to let a real economic populist like get into office in the Oval Office, the big business Republican Party? I don't know.
Yeah, he's got some pretty powerful backing from like Peter Thiel and co. But at the same time, you look at the strings attached from like the Miriam Adelson types and all those people in the current administration. It is going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. But do you think there's, I guess for last question on 2028, like as far as the kind of setup at that level, is there a like is there a point in time where you're going to have like a very like high level of confidence for, right, who's running for the Democrats, who's running, what the situation is going to look like as far as that whole election?
I mean, you put a gun to my head right now. The Republicans lose the midterms by probably 20 votes. Democrats on day one launch an Epstein commission. They create anti-corruption cases. They arrest multiple people in the Trump cabinet. They do another Trump impeachment, and then they try and go after free speech. I think those things are reasonably what could happen. Do I think they pack the Supreme Court, that kind of thing? No, I don't. But they'll talk about it for sure. And that will be enough, in my opinion, to probably push the House national popular vote back to somewhat parity. In which case, J.D. Vance, who is significantly better of a candidate than Gavin Newsom or AOC or Pete Buttigieg or whoever's going to run, will probably be beating them narrowly in the polling. And so it's a race that they can win, I think. And then it all comes down to, well, is Act Blue still taking in $1.5 billion a year in foreign money laundering? Have we actually cleaned up the Dominion voting systems? There's so many exogenous variables that there's no way to really predict. Like, that's what should happen if nothing changes. But we're supposed to arrest Act Blue. They raised almost $2 billion this year. We've sold Dominion to another company that's allegedly dismantling these systems and is going to recertify them. There are, we've made big moves. We took out Maduro, and the allegations that I read in that book, Stolen Elections, are very, very, very deep. And now we're doing resource nationalism. Globally, we're competing with China to do a power grab of sources of oil and real estate for global dome systems. I think it's like a war is going to really throw a wrench in that whole thing. So I think impossible to predict, but Newsom and AOC are not really viable, or Buttigieg for that matter, viable national political candidates. And J.D. Vance basically polls like Trump does. And I think once J.D. Vance gets out from underneath Trump, we'll see reasons that his numbers will go back up. But then you have this whole thing. Well, what does 2028 look like when he's asking America to vote for Republicans and the campaign slogan is "This time we mean it"? You know what I mean? Like, I just don't know, man. It's so
third time's the charm. Like,
well, I mean, just politics for the last 50 years is look at this cardboard cutout, and this is their policy on X. It's like, well, that's just not where we're at anymore.
Yeah, you gotta show me the goods, basically. As far as, I mean. Yeah. That's the thing is, like, if they don't actually deliver on some of the stuff in the next 4 years, especially if you have, I think, roadblocks being thrown up by the Democrats, it's going to be hard to convince people that the system can be fixed within the system. So,
yeah. It's funny. They have people like Shapiro that probably wouldn't even do that bad. But then he's got other problems.
Yeah.
He's got own creation.
Other skeletons in the closet.
Well, I'm talking about innate characteristics that are uncomfortable for Democrat voters.
Yeah. I think that's going to be another issue that people are going to be more willing to discuss as kind of the Overton window continues to shift. But as far as before I let you go, I do have to ask my traditional closing question, which is, what book should I add to my reading list? Can be history, investments, finance, anything, even fiction if you're on that front.
Jeez. No, I read so little nowadays. I'm mostly on the internet, and I think I watch videos is probably am I different? Am I weird? Does that make me different? I mean, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I listen to a ton of podcasts and try and keep up with current events that way. So I think that's where most people get their news these days, at least around my age.
Yeah, well, like thought leadership, examining ideas from different directions. Mostly I've been watching people like Shoe on Head and Homath and What If Alt Hist and Asmongold. And it scratches a certain itch for me. So if people aren't aware of those names, I'm sure you can put them out on a Twitter forum. And you probably got your own. I would love your input on people I should watch as a rare old head that cares about what the kids think. I'm reading Stolen Elections though right now, the Ralph Pizzulo book, and that is really mind blowing.
Okay, I'll have to check that one out. the what's the general gist of the book? Like, is it talking about the voting machines in Venezuela you kind of mentioned, or what's the whole story there?
Well, it's like, yes, but it's also a lot more detailed about a essentially 20-year plot by Cuba, China, and Iran to completely undermine the West by
Hmm.
not just stealing their elections, but by subverting our culture. And it's alleged in there that many, many elected representatives are taking cartel to soul money. And it's bad. And Patrick Byrne obviously funded these people that are, these are the 10 or 12 whistleblowers that are former Smartmatic Venezuelan executives that have been, some of them brought into the US and are actually like cooperating witnesses, I guess, at this point with, I don't know who's doing the investigations, but the stuff that Patrick Byrne himself has alleged on the internet. And this is a guy that it's had a spotty past, but he did fund a multi-year program that allegedly prevented the 2024 election from being stolen. And I was on election night live streams. I was worried there for about 2 hours that we were looking at the steal again. And in the book, they talk about how, well, no, Elon Musk assisted their team in identifying the IP addresses of the Dominion server farms in Serbia. This is what's alleged in the book. And that White Hats essentially DDoS'd or took it down somehow or whatever and prevented the steal unbeknownst to Trump, which is kind of wild. And Patrick Byrne is now out there saying, well, Rick Grinnell and John Ratcliffe, head of the CIA, at the very least, those two people are compromised and have videos owned by our foreign adversaries of them cheating with various uncomfortable, arrangements. And that's big. That's really big. Probably big enough for Trump to call Ratcliffe into the Oval Office and say, what the hell? Like, what happened here? Why is this going on? So the system, I think, is just way worse, more corrupted, perverse. But we're starting to see the fabric of the matrix, though. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, Mossad is probably functionally, no different than the FBI. They're one and the same outfit. Yes, the cartels are paying off our elected representatives. Yes, the deep state has captured the Republican Party. Just look at the National Endowment for Democracy vote. Like, that tells you everything you need to know. Like, yes, the pharmaceutical companies own the Republican Party. Like, yep, that's a big yep. So, every day where I get more sort of despairing about the future, we're seeing more of what's actually going on. Just think about yourself a year ago and how much less you knew. We hadn't even heard about USAID yet.
Well, I think the thing too, especially since 2020, it seems like all this stuff has been on hyperdrive as far as like the pace of things, the news cycle, like how fast it's moving. I don't know if you kind of felt that way too, but it seems like it's sped up since 2020.
Yeah, well, that's I think the secret to success. Trump was complete shock and awe controlling the news cycle for the first 3 months of his administration. Come to find out that it was mostly the doing of Elon Musk and Doge. I mean, he was putting out a lot of really great executive orders, but it felt like winning every day. And in those situations, it's hard to look at the Democrats' psyops and see them taking root. They just don't. But it's when Trump gets in his own way and the emperor has no clothes that people look for explanations. And when there is truth to some of these things, then again, just a week ago, they were doing it again. There was shock and awe for about 5 days. We were going after Blackstone, who's buying up houses. We were capping interest rates. These were big things. And now we're talking about freaking Greenland again. Like, what is going on?
Yeah, no, it's definitely.
Yeah, Minneapolis. They turned Minneapolis into a referendum, from a referendum on government fraud into a referendum on ICE overreach tactics. That's what it's become. That's what's in the news now.
Yeah, it's interesting to watch how fast some of these things change, but it is definitely a help to have someone like you kind of on the case and keeping an eye on the different trends. So if my listeners are looking to find your work and find your social media, where can they look for you?
We're on Twitter at Rasmussen_poll for the main account. I'm at Honest Pollster. I just started an Instagram where I put clips up too. It's kind of cute. So go check me out there at Honest Pollster as well. And then we do a couple of videos a week and stream on YouTube and Rumble at Rasmussen_poll.
Yeah, definitely worth keeping up with the social media. Is very, very entertaining there on Twitter. So I appreciate you taking the time to come on. I think we'll definitely have to have you back again at some point as we kind of get into the lead up stage of the election and the midterms this year. But I think with that, we'll be wrapping up. Thanks for stopping by. We'll see you next time.